Welcome to Compelling Topics, the only channel dedicated to the perspective of leading researchers from the Italian independent scene. Let's turn your minds on. With Professor Simonetta Torresi, we will examine sites such as Carcassonne, Notre-Dame, and the Abbey of Ferrières, uncovering how incorrect datings, later interventions, and legends have created an image of history that does not always match reality. Together, we will learn how to distinguish what is truly medieval from what is a modern construction disguised as ancient, and how historical documents help us understand the truth. All buildings are real because they stand before us. When I speak of true or false, I am referring to dating. A building is true or false depending on whether it actually belongs to the century to which it is assigned. If a building dates from 1900 but is attributed to the 10th century or the 1st century, then it automatically becomes false. If, on the other hand, it is dated to the 12th century and it truly belongs to the 12th century, then it is authentic. That is the whole point. That buildings may have been restored is beyond question. But we must understand whether they were restored, rebuilt, or even constructed in a later period. Otherwise, we fall into confusion. I am surprised that art history books describe buildings as original when in fact they are not. This is a point we need to understand clearly. Let us begin with Carcassonne. There it is. It looks so medieval that it seems fake. And in fact, it is. Many things happened in Carcassonne during the Middle Ages, but here we must pause. In many previous discussions, we have said that numerous events traditionally located in France or Germany may instead have taken place in the Marche region or elsewhere in Italy. Why constantly frame this as thesis and antithesis? Because there is an official historiography claiming that certain events occurred in specific nations. I propose the antithesis, that they occurred elsewhere. And to challenge a thesis, one must compare, start from what exists, and arrive at a synthesis. This comes from ancient Greek dialectics. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. In the Middle Ages, the trivium consisted of rhetoric, grammar, and dialectic. Without thesis and antithesis, synthesis cannot be reached. Simply speaking for the sake of speaking serves no purpose. Fairy tales are pleasant, but here we are being offered a fairy tale, the fairy tale castle. Carcassonne is presented as a medieval city dating back to the 700s, 800s, 900s, even 1000. Yet the current fortified city was largely restored in the 19th century by the architect Eugene Viollet-le-Duc. So why is it a UNESCO World Heritage Site as an example of a medieval castle? Are people aware that Viollet-le-Duc carried out extensive 19th century reconstructions? Medieval festivals are held there. Visitors attend believing it is entirely original. Look at Carcassonne. Everything precise, perfect angles. That was not typical medieval construction, and it was Viollet-le-Duc who carried out its restoration. It is said that there was an earlier castle that was restored, but today, building something anew is often called restoration. If there was an ancient castle, where is it? There should be at least one stone, one brick. There is nothing. Viollet-le-Duc himself wrote that restoring a building does not mean maintaining or repairing it, but restoring it to a complete state that may never have existed at any given moment. What kind of restoration is that? Carcassonne is presented as medieval heritage. It is protected by UNESCO. Medieval festivals are held there. Tickets are sold. The difference from Disneyland is only that Disneyland is made of plastic. The concept is similar. Viollet-le-Duc also restored Notre-Dame de Paris. He claimed to have restored it in style. When the cathedral caught fire in 2019, many mourned the medieval cathedral, but numerous visible elements were 19th century interventions by Viollet-le-Duc. If he intervened extensively in the 19th century, and already in 1804 Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself emperor at Notre-Dame, clearly something existed before. But much of what we see today results from later interventions. Let us go inside and consider how such structures could have been built in the Middle Ages. Napoleon crowned himself emperor on December 2, 1804, at Notre-Dame. For that occasion, a large decorative drapery was reportedly placed over the facade. Some interpret this as meaning the facade was incomplete. Inside, the soaring heights appear extraordinary. Comparing them with Italian medieval churches raises questions about construction techniques. These structures are often classified as Gothic, yet many visible features reflect later restorations or neo-Gothic elements. When we visit Carcassonne or Notre-Dame de Paris, what exactly are we seeing? There is also the checkerboard floor pattern, which some associate with Masonic symbolism. Similar patterns have been introduced in modern restorations, for example, in the Cathedral of Reconati. Napoleon has sometimes been associated with Freemasonry. Officially, all this is considered medieval heritage, yet we know many elements were reshaped in the 19th century. There were also contemporary debates and documented correspondence concerning Viollet-le-Duc's restoration methods. Italian medieval churches are filled with frescoes. In some northern examples, decoration differs or was altered over time. The French Revolution, for example, caused damage to many religious buildings. Let us consider Germany. Take Cologne Cathedral, Kölner Dom. Gothic, magnificent, one of Germany's most visited monuments. It was completed in 1880, often rounded to 1890 in popular accounts, after centuries of intermittent construction. It is said that construction began in 1248, not the 16th century, and that the cathedral stands on earlier Christian structures. Where, then, is the medieval cathedral? It exists in earlier phases incorporated into the present structure. The same applies to Ulm Minster, Ulmer Münster, completed in the 19th century, though begun in 1377. In France, we see Viollet-le-Duc. In Germany, Romantic nationalism. The French Revolution alone does not explain all restorations. Returning to France, consider the Abbey of Ferrières-en-Gédonais. Its foundation is traditionally attributed to Clovis I, later associated with Carolingian and Gothic phases. The 19th century architect Jean-Just Gustave Lisch carried out restorations there. Substructures from earlier periods have been identified. Upper portions reflect later rebuilding. This abbey is important in Carolingian studies. Alcuin of York, advisor to Charlemagne, was associated with it. It is said that Charlemagne granted the monastery property near the port of Quintavic on the Flemish coast. After Charlemagne's death, one of his successors reclaimed the gift. Thus Lupus of Ferrières, Lupus Servatus, wrote of hardship among his 72 monks. In his letters he states, "We wear worn and patched garments. The servants are nearly naked and cold. We appease our hunger with garden herbs." The monastery lay near the Loire, in fertile land. Alessandro Barbero notes that the monks purchased supplies at the market of Orleans. Lupus's correspondence mentions buying legumes, grain, and beer. At one point, he sold church vessels for funds. Lupus argued that relying constantly on money was not proper monastic economy. Ideally, estates should produce surplus for exchange without constant monetary purchase. What surpluses? It is not explained. It is well narrated, but it is a narrative that leaves questions. Lupus's correspondence is full of requests. A man who claims to be starving asks a friend for 20 tall trees to build a boat. He asks the abbot of Prum for expensive garments to send as a gift to the Pope. He even writes to the King of England asking for lead to cover a church roof, to be delivered to the port of Quintavic where his agents would collect it. A monastery that claims to be reduced to growing only garden herbs writes to the King of England for lead. Why England in particular? It is said that there was much lead in Wales and Scotland, but there are documents stating that those populations only learned to extract it in later periods. And besides, in France there were lead veins, and there were Roman cities with lead pipes. Was it really impossible to recover material there? Furthermore, in none of these cases is payment mentioned. It is assumed that the abbey would repay in the future with favors and services. But what services would the King of England have needed from an abbey that claimed to be starving? So this is the point. The abbey we see today at Ferrières is the result of 19th century interventions, yet there are many documents, both before and after Lupus. Who wrote them? If the documents are authentic, perhaps the abbey was not where it is said to have been. So I asked myself, who was Lupus of Ferrières really? In Latin he was called Lupus Servatus, known as Abbot of Ferrières. Not Ferrières in the French form, but Ferrières. In Italy, there was the Ducatus Ferrières, the territory of Ferrara. An abbey called Ferrariensis must have been located in the territory of the Duchy of Ferrara. And if we read the described conditions, the impossibility of cultivating anything but a few herbs, the need for boats to move around. The only compatible place is the present abbey of Pomposa. Pomposa was originally the Insula Pomposiana, surrounded by the waters of the Padi Goro, the Padi Volano, and the sea. There, indeed, one could cultivate only herbs around the monastery. And there, indeed, tree trunks would have been needed to build boats. At Pomposa, we find real stratification, remains dating back to the 5th to 6th century, documented expansions. In 1026, the lengthening by 2 bays. In 1063, the erection of the bell tower by a German builder, Dusdedet. Here the stratification exists. At Ferrières, instead, we have many documents, but the present structure is 19th century. After the year 1000, Pomposa became a flourishing monastic center, one of the most important abbeys in Europe. And so the doubt arises, were the documents up to a certain point moved? Did part of the history remain here and part there? It is said that supplies arrived at the port of Quintavik. If that port is placed at the mouth of the Sisano River, between Ancona and Paese Urbino, then everything fits. Class, the ancient port of Ravenna, was silted up at that time. Pomposa, an abbey of Frankish origin and later Carolingian, would have made sense in that context. And at Pomposa, there is also a floor labyrinth reminiscent of the one at Notre-Dame. Perhaps Violet Leduc, who traveled extensively in Italy before his restorations, saw it and drew inspiration from it. Finally, the question, what would be the purpose of all this fiction? History is written by the victors. If you shift the geographical center of history, you change the perception of the past. But be careful, that does not mean there was nothing there before. That too could be a deception. The documents exist, and there are many of them. But if Ferrières means Ferrara, Ducatus Ferrières, then perhaps Ferrières was not in France. And the question becomes inevitable. How is it possible not to see it? It is clear that it is very convenient to say Ferrières and place everything up there, because then the port of Quintavik is placed there as well. But if you really put Quintavik in that area, it becomes a problem. If instead you place it elsewhere, between Senigallia and Fano, then everything fits. So they had everything brought up there. But it is all fake. And not only that, it is really a fairy tale. I had you read it. It is told like a children's story. On this side there was nothing, on that side there was everything, and everyone stays calm. But now let us look at the monument par excellence. First, however, something about who Lupus of Ferrières really was, and about the king who removed the gift from the abbey. We will speak about that another time. Because there at Ferrières, or rather, where Ferrières would be, emperors were also supposedly crowned. But if it was Pomposa, then it makes sense. There were struggles among Charlemagne's grandsons. Some were crowned in one place, others elsewhere. On the lore it does not work. Certain things do not add up there. But tonight we are analyzing monuments. So let us look at the astonishing, dazzling, marvelous Abbey of Aachen. Let us observe it in religious silence. We are almost moved before such medieval spectacle. This is the Palatine Chapel of Aachen, that is, of Aquisgrana. Because the city is not called Aquisgrana, it is called Aachen. Why was it ever called Aquisgrana? No one really knows. And here is the chapel. But where is the city? If the emperor lived there, where were the palace, the Palatine school, the stables, the servants, the dignitaries, the scribes? Where did all these people live? The city is not there. Someone should explain where this population was. Did they forget to reconstruct the city? Did they only build the chapel? They should have built a fake city too, otherwise the picture does not hold. Let us remember that Charlemagne became emperor in 800. The Palatine Chapel would have been built before the year 1000, indeed before 800. We are well before 1000. In other cases they at least say 12th century, 13th century. Here we are in the 8th to 9th century, and they would have built something like this? Yet in the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries, to build European cities, Italian architects were called. So how is it that in the 800s there were technicians capable of building all this? and then suddenly there was no one anymore. Some time ago, in a program titled Barbaro Respond, a question was asked about a possible Aachen in the Marche region. The answer was, no, that one is the one there. People, since Charlemagne died, have always gone to Mass there. Always gone to Mass there. But if that was truly the Emperor's Palatine Chapel, his private chapel, did he let the people in for Mass? In many churches, until the 15th century, the people watched Mass through a small window, without even entering. And here public Mass would have been celebrated inside the Emperor's private chapel? And then the famous throne displayed at Aachen, which everyone points to as Charlemagne's throne. But it is Barbaro himself who writes in his book on Charlemagne that for a long time it was believed the throne had been built to imitate Solomon's throne, until the discovery of certain drawings showed that it had been remodeled into that form in the 10th century. So the throne displayed there is not from Charlemagne's time. It was remodeled in the 10th century. He writes this. It is said that Charlemagne was buried in front of the atrium of his Palatine Chapel, in front of the entrance, outside. This is what the documents report. A news article published on May 19, 2010, reports that German archaeologists, following an accepted legend, searched for 3 years beneath the atrium of Aachen Cathedral, considered by historians to be the Palatine Chapel of Aquisgrana and the site of Charlemagne's original tomb. For 3 years they excavated in front of the door, in that area. But the oldest evidence found underground did not predate the 10th century. Despite this, the archaeologist Andreas Shaw believes that Charlemagne must have been buried there. 3 years searching for the tomb, and there is no trace earlier than a certain century. And yet it continues to be maintained that it must be there. A few days ago, another news item came out. A small piece of wall was found beneath a street in Aachen, but it is Roman. And so they said, where is the medieval layer? It should be above, but it is not there. At least one piece of wall was found. But the question remains, where is the medieval stratification one would expect to find? So we have two elements. The throne was remodeled, and Barbaro writes this. The tomb underneath is not there, and this is said by the German archaeologist who spent 3 years excavating there looking for it. If in the subsoil there is nothing older than the 10th century, how can the structures above be earlier? How can they be from Charlemagne's time? I am not the one saying it. They are saying it. I do not need to add anything. I simply did some research, even basic research if you like. They are the ones publishing this information. Yet then they contradict themselves or omit certain steps. And then I am told that I say incorrect things. But if they are the ones writing it, if the official sources state these things, where is the error? I am simply lining up what they themselves declare. With Professor Simonetta Torresi, we've uncovered how restorations, legends, and misdated monuments can create a misleading image of history. But this is just the beginning. In the next episode of The Very Origin of Europe on Compelling Topics, we'll dig even deeper into Europe's hidden past and the truths behind its most iconic sites. Don't miss it.